And this is a contradiction I didn't know how to get out of today. I say little thing number five, don't forget the verticals, but I led it with a horizontal picture. That's because the uh my consistency part of me, I always like all the title subjects. They all use the same slide when I'm talking about each particular one. And so on this one, uh I say consider the verticals, but I had to lead with the horizontal shot. So I hope you'll forgive me there. But on little thing number five, don't forget the vertical because I see this a lot too. This is not number one, but I see a lot of people when they shoot pictures, they tend to always shoot in horizontal format. And, I guess technically you can always go and crop into a vertical, but I've always been of the mindset just try to get it as close as you can to your vision in the field. That saves you on post-processing time in the end, and it just to me it makes the whole process more enjoyable. I'd much rather be outside taking pictures than I would sitting in front of a computer at home. And so as you're out taking pictures, don't forget the verticals. I don't know this for I don't know this to be the absolute truth, but I judged a photo contest a couple of years ago. It had probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 thousand pictures in it to start with that had to cull through and pick the good ones from the bad ones. And I noticed a, a lot of them, especially from the same people, were all horizontal formats with the subject right in the middle. From a technical standpoint and a subject matter standpoint, they weren't bad pictures, but they showed zero regard for composition. And I've wondered often if that's social media's fault. Because with like Instagram, it's a square format and Facebook, I think Facebook you can use the native format from the cameras, but uh a lot of pictures are just center punch like that. And so one thing I encourage people to do is when you're shooting pictures, landscapes or wildlife, when it's appropriate, shoot vertical images. I think you'll be happy in the end. Like the landscape on the left, I'm gonna have to explain that. That's a comet from about 2 years ago, right at sunset, and those are the Wichita Mountains in southwest Oklahoma, where that is. And so because the comet was vertical and the whole scene was vertical, it just lent itself to a vertical composition. If you shot that horizontal, you're gonna lose, unless you shoot it really wide, you may lose part of the tail. That picture on the left was shot with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. Picture on the right was shot with the 70 to 200 millimeter lens. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I shot that picture, that's a picture I had designed in my mind. What you can't see is the feeder that's it's probably 30 feet from where I sit right now. You can't see the feeder on the right where the hummingbird is going in to feed from. I just knew there was going to be a time of the year where the sun was going to come up over the trees in the distance, and I could get a silhouetted hummingbird as it's going in to feed. And so, what I'm not going to lie to you about is I have cover aspirations for this picture one day. So that's another reason why I shot it vertical. But think about vertical because sometimes, again on this, if I'd have shot it horizontal, you'd have saw the feeder in the picture. And if I never would have told you a feeder was there, there's a good chance you'd have looked at it and thought, that's the coolest picture ever. I don't know how he did it. You'd never consider there's a feeder there. So I shot it horizontal too to get rid of the feeder. And then more tulips in the Netherlands there. This was using a combination of techniques here. Got the starburst F22, the using the backlighting technique, but with the caveat, use the backlighting technique, but also had one of those 5-in-1 reflectors where we reflected light back into the tulips to be able to get that golden light on them, to be able to not only backlight them, get the starburst, but also get that light being reflected back into there, that golden light. And then you can see there the bighorn sheep, they lent themselves well to a really clean vertical background. And so again, always think about the verticals as well. And then here's your bonus tips as we wind down. It looks like we got about 10 minutes to go till 1 o'clock. So we're still in good shape as far as time is concerned. As always, if you have a lot of questions, I haven't even looked at the chat. I'll stay with you as long as we need to. I'll get to the end of this slide here or end of these slides, and then I'll turn the presentation off. We'll just go to and just have a chat where we can see all of our faces again if you want to be on camera. But here's your bonus ones. More and more when we're in the field, I try to coach people on taking pictures of people. I think inherently people like taking pictures of people. Uh, Again, not universal when I say that, but I think if given a choice, so many of y'all have children, grandchildren, and you just wanted to take better pictures of them when you're outside and when they're doing things. And one of the skills that I learned a long time ago, which helped me professionally, was when I got pretty adept. Again, not going to say I was ever the best at it, but when I got fairly adept at taking pictures of people in the outdoors, doing things that people do in the outdoors and looking believable doing it, it's when I started getting hired by some of the biggest companies in the outdoor industry, when I could finally get where I could do that. And so, as a general rule, when you're taking pictures of people, have them do something. I would argue that most people inherently, well, I say that most people my age and older inherently, or maybe a little younger than me and older, inherently don't like to have their pictures made. They didn't grow up in a selfie culture, and so it's not second nature to just take pictures of yourself. Because I can tell you, whenever I'm in a picture, I'm usually the least interesting thing in that picture. Uh, and so most people are a little bit apprehensive about what they're doing, but the advice I give to people is have them do something. When we do the Cowboys in Canyonlands, have them ride a horse, have them mess with the rope, have them do something uh, that takes their mind off what you're doing. And then your role is just to find that good angle, find the good backgrounds, find the good light, angle of light, all those things we talked about, and then put it all together at the end. And so that's always a good tip. And usually if I have to take a portrait of someone, I'll stand there and talk to them for 4 or 5 minutes just to get them comfortable. And I'll really pay attention to how they naturally stand. If they stand like this with their arms crossed, that's someone take their picture. If they stand with their hands in their pocket, that's how I'm going to take their picture. I'm just trying to get them comfortable and just say, when you stood that way a while ago, stand that way again. I think that's your best look. And then slowly they get comfortable. And when you have them do something, aside from just stand there and cheese for the camera, you get a lot more natural pictures. And I know this is in the vein of nature photography, but like I say, I think there's a big desire for people to take pictures, people to get better at taking pictures of other people, not just in a studio really formally lit and formally posed kind of setting, but just people being people, people doing natural things. With wildlife, I always say wait for a little action. I'm going to go backwards here. And when I say wait for a little action, I'll use this quail picture as an example. That bird's just standing there on that stump, but just the fact that his leg's moving forward, that's the little bit of action I'm talking about. When you see stuff like that happen, always take pictures of it. If his legs were together, it would lack a little bit of dynamics that I like to see in wildlife pictures, but just the fact that leg's a little bit forward, or maybe the both ears are turned your way, like let me find it, like the burrows right there. They at first their ears were backwards, and to me, equines look better. All animals look better if they kind of have that alert look. But equines like a burro, I said, "Hey burros, what are y'all doing?" Just talked to them a little bit, and they looked at me like that and kind of perked their ears up. They were wild in the sense they weren't being held back by a fence and they could roam wherever they wanted to roam, but they'd seen people before, so I was fairly close to these guys. I was probably uh I don't know, 30 or 40 yards away from them. And you can see almost all these wildlife pictures. They've got somewhat of an alert look, and that's what I mean. Even this bison, his ears, I don't know if bison's ears ever go forward now that I think about it, but the fact that he turned and looked at us and he kind of had that ready stance, I think that makes all the difference in the world. Sloths, it's hard to ever make them look ready. Like this bear, that side eye look the bear gave me, that's that little thing I'm talking about. Look for a little bit of action whenever you shoot the pictures. And even if you're shooting pictures like that anyway, whenever I do these slideshows and I come back and I curate the pictures that I'm going to show y'all, or I'm not necessarily I'm doing show and tell, but the pictures I will include in these presentations, that's the kind of stuff I look for. I look for something, wait for a little bit of action, however that action is defined, and then those are the pictures I'll usually pick. Not all the time, but those are the pictures I'll usually pick to go with it. And then don't overthink the process. That's so much of photography. Nature photography involves the mechanical skills of just setting the camera right and getting all your settings right and the composition right. And then you have the that's the controllable stuff. Then you have the uncontrollable stuff like, is the animal going to give you any action to take a picture of? And so a lot of times people get lost in just the process. They're thinking too hard about, well, should I be 800 ISO or 1000 ISO? Well, in the end, yeah, maybe it matters some, but in the big scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. Just pick one and go with it. Should I shoot it 1/1000th of a second or 1/2000th of a second? Well, it depends on what you're trying to go for. Even if you shoot at 1/1000th of a second and it blurs the bird's wings a little bit, as long as the eye's in focus, that's really what matters. And so a lot of times I'll find as people are learning, and I've done it too, this isn't an indictment, but you tend to overthink the process instead of understanding so much of photography. It's like uh, you washing your hair or me washing my beard. It's if you look at the uh, if you look at the directions on the shampoo bottle, it says wash, rinse, repeat. That's a lot of photography. It's the same process over and over again. You're making sure your shutter speed's where it needs to be. You got the ISO you want, you got the aperture you want, and it's just doing the same thing over and over and over again from a technical standpoint. And so again, I tell people all the time, don't overthink the process. Let it happen. Get your settings right. Be confident in your settings. And then just if you make a mistake like we all do, learn from it, move forward, get ready for the next scene that comes up. So don't overthink it. And then I said this earlier, take pictures with the end in mind. I'm always thinking about if I aim my camera at this subject, what do I think I'm going to have in the end? And so again, it's a powerful way of thinking. It's a powerful way of adding that to your process because in the end, uh, I'll go back. This picture of the tulips right there, that's a perfect example of thinking with the end in mind. This was a picture that a lot of the people in the group took. I was showing them how to do this. But I knew how cool it would look if you got the starburst and then you still had some detail in the some colorful detail in the flowers. And so with with the reflector in place and instructing everybody shoot at f/22 and shoot at a low angle, I'll hold the reflector there for you. It was thinking with the end in mind, thinking with, okay, this is what I want to try to accomplish in the end. And when you do that, it unlocks this part of your brain that tells you this is what you got to do to accomplish what you're trying to achieve. Now, I don't mean to be preachy when I say this at all, so bear with me if I sound that way a little bit. One of the things I always taught my children is that if you say something like, well, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this, or even now that they're young adults and they say, I can't afford this on things, I always discourage them from that way of thinking because I tell them once you say that to yourself, you've turned off that part of your brain that helps you figure out how you can accomplish that, how you can afford something, or how you can do this, or how you can accomplish your goal in mind. And so when you start thinking with the end in mind, and whether you're coming up with these compositions on your own or you've seen another picture like this and you want to try to accomplish a similar technique, when you start thinking with the end in mind, you start using that part of your brain that helps you solve those problems and figure out. And in the end, with most photographic problems, it's not that vexing. It's again, it's that wash, rinse, and repeat mentality. Almost every picture I took here was just kind of the same process each and every time. I was thinking about it. I was looking for a particular picture to talk about solving those photographic problems, but I think you get what I'm talking about. So as we go through all this, I know there's a few questions that popped up on the chat. Lee, I hope it got where you could finally see my slides. If it didn't, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to. I'll send out the recording later on today sometime, and so you'll be able to go back and look at that. And as I talk through all this, I think I'm right at the end with all this. It is about 2 minutes till 1 o'clock, which is perfect. Okay, yeah. Think with the end in mind. Even this next picture. Told everybody if we wait, because I saw that coyote, and this is a little bit of field craft I talked about in the last webinar, that once he gave that head cock, I knew he was about to jump. So I told everybody, be ready. And then shooting with the end in mind, hopefully he would jump. If he didn't, we got awesome pictures. If he did, we'd get even more awesome pictures. And so he jumped. Everybody was ready. We all got that shot. And then that's I can't remember. That's in the Costa Rica trip. That's with the frog. Same area as the frog was a while ago. And then this is a good example too. I forgot about this picture. Thinking with the end in mind. This was on our Moonlight over the Prairie workshop back in early March. Uh, it was all about shooting landscapes under moonlight. We were fortunate enough during that workshop, we had a total lunar eclipse. And so with that in mind, we were taking pictures with the end in mind of all the phases of the lunar eclipse. That's just part of them I show there. And then how to overlay that on a good background. This is a composite image, by the way, if you don't know. But all of this was taken with the end shot in mind. We just, you know, knew what we were going to do in the beginning, knew all the shots we are going to put together, but did this shot with the end in mind. And with that, well, let me go past one more, then I'm going to turn this presentation off. Any questions? We'll save that for last, but let me say this before I go any further, before I turn this presentation off. Stay in touch, russell@russellgraves.com. I do always answer emails. Sometimes I get caught up and it takes me a few days to get to you, but I'll always go back through and answer them. I'm not going to say I haven't missed one or two every now and then, but I always make it an effort to answer your emails in the end. And so if you have any questions beyond this webinar, please feel free to stay in touch, and I'll do my best to answer your questions when you contact me. So with that said, let me stop the sharing.